Good afternoon, and welcome to our lunchtime conversation today. It's part of our 55 and Better virtual expo. It's brought to you by the Loveland Reporter Herald and the Greeley Tribune. Today's conversation is entitled Aging Better with Your Pet. My name is Al Manzi. I'm president and CEO for Prairie Mountain Media and also publisher at the Reporter Herald and the Tribune. I'm joined today by Ayla Preston. She's a veterinarian with 4 Seasons veterinary specialists. She'll tell us more about herself in a minute. Immediately following the presentation, I'll host a question and answer session, so please feel free to ask any questions during the presentation by using your Q&A and chat features. So please welcome Ayla Preston.
Hello, everybody. I'm just going to take a second here to get myself set up. Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today. It's quite an honor to be speaking with all of you about a topic that I think we all love, which is talking about our pets. My own pet is actually here today and maybe moving in and out of the screen. So if you see the likes of a golden retriever, that's just Lola. And you'll meet her through this presentation today as well. So just a little bit about myself. So I am originally from Arizona. I graduated, which I was thinking about this 15 years ago now, from the University of Arizona in Tucson. Go Wildcats. And after I got my undergraduate degree, I went to veterinary school at Colorado State in Fort Collins. After I did that, I then moved on to complete 2 separate internships. One of them was a what we call a small animal rotating internship in Denver, Colorado. And then my husband and I moved to Tampa, Florida for a year, where I did a specialty internship in emergency and critical care. And then we moved back to Colorado, and I completed a 3-year residency in emergency and critical care back at CSU, where I also obtained my master's degree during that residency. And then came the really fun part of passing my board certifying exam after completing my residency. But that is in the past, and that is how I got DACVECC after my other credentials. Just means that I'm a veterinary specialist in emergency and critical care. I have been the ER ICU director at 4 Seasons veterinary specialists in Loveland ever since. I'm a mother to 2 beautiful little creatures. I have 2 daughters, 3.5 and 1.5. My husband is an avid golfer. I cannot play to save my life. I can putt, and I'm really good at riding along in the golf cart and soaking up the sun. But other than that, I do not play. And then I'm also a mom to my fur baby, Lola, who is very soon to be geriatric herself. And so she's kind of a perfect little spokesperson for what we'll be talking about today when it comes to aging and our pets. I love good quality family time, anything outdoors, cooking, decorating, and I do love football. And I also really thoroughly enjoy public speaking and educating people both inside and outside the veterinary world. So with that being said, we will go ahead and get started. So some of the things we'll talk about today include the benefit of owning a pet. Which are many, many. We'll talk about some preventative health care for pets that are aging. We'll talk about what you might notice in your pet as your pets age. And I use some examples when it comes to things that I've noticed in Lola myself. We'll talk a little bit about some of the disease processes that our older pets are more predisposed to getting. We'll talk about when we should see the vet. How to keep ourselves and our pets kind of mentally and physically fit. We'll talk a little bit about quality of life. I also have just some additional kind of tips from the vet as far as things that I think are important when it comes to owning a pet. And then, as Al had mentioned, we will then go on to kind of a Q&A session, which he will help to moderate. So when I started thinking about the joy of owning pets and why owning a pet is so wonderful, I mean, I could have gone on and on. I could have done an entire presentation just on that. But I think some of the more important things, you know, that we think about is just the unconditional love that they provide to us. You can go out and have an awful day, maybe feel like you've had a day where you haven't acted the greatest, or maybe you were unkind or whatever it may be, and you walk through your front door and your pet still sees you in this perfect light. So I think that is truly the definition of unconditional love. I think pets provide a great sense of purpose. You know, my mom has been an empty nester now for a while, and her dog is everything now. He's her kid because we're gone. Maybe someone has lost a spouse. And so it just helps, I think, to give people, you know, especially as we age, a sense of someone needing us and needing to take care of something that depends on us for everything, really. You know, it's been very well documented that animals improve mental, emotional, and physical health. There are reasons why animals are used as support animals. There's a reason why they go into hospitals and you know, visit people who are ill. They go into nursing homes. They, you know, they smile that they can bring, you know, the way that they can even have true health effects, like lowering people's blood pressure, lowering cholesterol, you know, all those kinds of things. The benefits that come from a health standpoint are huge. You know, there's even, you know, kind of medical support animals. So pets that help kind of monitor for seizures, or pets that help with maybe a veteran who suffers from post-traumatic stress. So, you know, huge benefits from there. Just a sense of companionship. You know, they decrease that feeling of loneliness. And I think that overall, you know, they increase a person's opportunity for socialization and exercise, you know, even if it's a daily walk around the block, or maybe they like to go to the dog park and that's how you kind of get out and socialize. Or maybe there are, you know, animal play dates where everyone's on the back porch and you're sitting and talking and while the dogs play. So there's just lots of reasons why it's beneficial to own a pet. You know, and the fact is pets age just like we do, and quite honestly, faster. And aging is just a part of this thing that we call life. And, you know, there's nothing that we can do to stop it, but we can try to embrace it. And there are measures that we can take to make sure that we age well together. And, you know, again, the fact is pets are an amazing addition to our lives, and we can help to keep each other healthy as we move through life. So healthy pets and owners, you know, I think when we think about our own health, let's also just take into account the health of our pet. If you're thinking, hey, I'm due for my annual physical, or I really should get my screening blood work, think about your pet. Has your pet had theirs? You know, if you're needing to make adjustments in your life with what you eat, or maybe how much you do or don't exercise, or, you know, maybe these aches and pains that you're feeling, you know, take into account that of your pet as well. Because again, as our bodies kind of change with age, theirs do too. And it's natural. So when I refer to kind of an aging pet or a geriatric pet, technically a geriatric pet is one that is 8 years and older. Not that all of a sudden when they turn age 8, you're going to notice all these things. Lola is almost 8, and I'm already noticing just some changes with her. But for all intents and purposes, technically a geriatric animal is 8 years and older. And so when we think about how often they should be visiting the veterinarian, Really twice a year, every 6 months. When they're younger, maybe a 2 to 3 year old dog, 3 to 4, whatever it may be, once yearly physicals, as long as they're otherwise healthy, should suffice. But these older guys really should have, trips to the vet every 6 months, just to make sure that everything is looking okay. Because a lot can happen in that 6 months. When we think about what will these visits look like, so definitely a physical exam. If nothing else, a physical exam, and I feel strongly, a blood pressure as well, to just make sure that there's nothing new that we're seeing. Are there new lumps and bumps? Are we hearing a new heart murmur? All that kind of stuff. Blood work at least once yearly in geriatric pets. I would say for the most part, it certainly isn't wrong to do twice yearly. And keep in mind that all these recommendations may change based on what disease processes they already have or ones that they're diagnosed with. We should also be screening their urine once to twice yearly. And I also feel pretty strongly that just screening chest x-rays once or twice a year, sometimes there are hidden cancers places, or the size and shape of their heart may be changing. And so in pets that are 8 years and older, I think at least, minimally once yearly chest x-rays are a good idea. And as I stated, those recommendations may change based on what other things your pet has going on. Some other things that I think are still really important to remember in the geriatric pet: parasite prevention. It's still important for them to be on their monthly heartworm. They're not free from getting heartworm. They're not free from getting GI parasites. I do think that having discussions about vaccinations for sure, if it's something that you're a little more cautious about in an older pet, I still keep Lola fully vaccinated, as I would any other animal, because I haven't had a health reason to change that in her. So I am all for, appropriate vaccinations, but certainly if you have questions about that, talk with your veterinarian. They may be able to check titers or something like that to see if the vaccines that they've had previously are still effective. You may be looking at some diet changes. And so, whether that's a senior diet, whether they have some arthritis and they need a joint diet, or they need to lose a little bit of weight, and so they need to go on more of a weight management diet. So it's also part of their preventative health. And then I think also part of their preventative health is talking about what environmental changes they might require as they age. We have wood floors in our house, but I do make sure that, Lola has easy access to the areas that are carpeted. Do they need more padded bedding? Do they need booties, when they go outside or around the home, whatever it may be. So these are all things that, I feel should be taken into account when you're taking your kiddo in for their preventative health. And so this is Lola. She is just sound asleep and resting in this picture. And so when we think about the things that we might start to notice, I really do think of her because she's a perfect example. So I obtained her when she was 7 weeks old. She will be 8 in December, or September. And this is what she does a lot of the day now. She sleeps a lot. And she gets tired earlier at night now. She used to just be able to go until the cows came home and then some. And now I notice, she'll play, but she has a bit of a limit. And then she needs to pass out and take a 2 to 3 hour nap, especially with my monsters running around the house. They tire her out. She sometimes, when she gets up, I'll notice that she is a little bit slower. Or when she gets up, she might have just an occasional like, oh man, I got to stretch for a minute, I'm a little sore kind of thing. So those are just, overall some of the changes. She, still loves to do her daily things and, that help make her quality of life good. But I think the biggest things are just that she sleeps more and she just doesn't have the stamina that she once used to. And, we can't really take her on these like multi-mile long hikes anymore, but, can she still go? Yes, we just need to modify it a little bit. And so, again, just like Lola, sleeping more, taking a little bit longer maybe to rise or to go up and down the stairs. A little bit less tolerant of the extremes in weather. So maybe a little bit less tolerant of the heat, a little bit less tolerant of the cold. Excessive exercise, like we talked about, they do need some modifications. Some people will just say that overall they've kind of slowed down, and it's just kind of a general term. And I understand what people mean when they're saying that. Changes in their weight, because they slow down a little bit and because they sleep more, and maybe their metabolism slows down, just like what happens in us, they're a little bit more predisposed to weight gain because they don't burn as many calories, but maybe they're taking in just as many. And they might be a little bit less agile. So those are some of the just general things that you might notice in your pet. Some common disease processes that can happen in these guys, certainly it's not an all-inclusive list by any means, but in general, they've had their teeth around for a long time. And so they are prone to periodontal or dental disease. Osteoarthritis, absolutely. I think we get arthritis as we age. So do they. I think that's pretty common. Abnormalities with their thyroid. So dogs in general will be hypothyroid or have low thyroid hormone. Cats will have hyper or high thyroid hormone. So those are things that can certainly happen. Chronic kidney disease. Those kidneys are not spring chickens anymore. And so we may notice that over time they have, aging changes associated with some of their organs. Some pets will experience some cognitive dysfunction. Some pets will develop things like heart disease, and there are certain breeds and things that are more predisposed to things like mitral valve disease, which is a valve that lives on the left side of the heart. And as they age, again, that heart has been working and pumping for a long time. And so that valve might get a little bit leaky as they age. Again, as I had mentioned, a little bit more predisposed to weight gain for the reasons that we discussed. And then, unfortunately, cancerous processes. Cancer doesn't discriminate. It's not just a geriatric pet problem. We have, 2-year-olds in under my care who have been diagnosed with cancer, but it's probably more common in the middle age to older animals. So when do you need to see the vet? So again, this is certainly not all inclusive. And, if you're ever concerned or have questions about your animal, reach out to your veterinarian. But, just for kind of a general overview, increased or decreased appetite, that can be abnormal and could indicate underlying things. Difficulty chewing, pain while chewing. We talked about the fact that they're prone to things like dental disease and gum disease as well. Increased thirst and urination, whether that could be a problem with their kidneys or whether they may have developed something like diabetes or certain changes, secondary to a cancerous process. So those are things that you would want to see the veterinarian over. Changes that are hard to overcome as far as when they are getting up, when they're going up and down stairs, if they can hardly walk anymore on slick surfaces, maybe they will need some of those alterations in their environment. Maybe they need some medications for osteoarthritis. Maybe they need physical therapy or acupuncture. If you feel like they're unwilling to go on walks, if they have changes in behavior, whether that's all of a sudden they're aggressive or they just seem very apathetic or, things like that. If you're noticing new lameness or limping on one of the legs that's not going away, that's certainly something that you would want to have checked out. Vision changes, and then changes to their hair coat or skin. I recently just noticed a new bump on Lola, and so I will absolutely be putting a needle into that bump and just making sure that it's not something that I need to be worrying about. And then, of course, as an emergency and critical care specialist, I feel obligated and want to just kind of educate on what certain things, would be indicative that your pet needs to be taken to the ER. So that would be, again, not an all-inclusive list, but if they collapse or have significant weakness, or you notice that their gums are pale, or they're having difficulty breathing, they're vomiting or having diarrhea, abdominal distension, trying to vomit with nothing coming up, uncontrolled pain, those kinds of things, toxin ingestion. I mean, the list of things that needs, that we see in the ER are very long. But again, kind of what I had alluded to previously, if there is something that concerns you, seek veterinary attention, period. Because it's better to know sooner versus later if there's something going on. And so now just a little bit about how we can keep our pets mentally and physically fit. And so, again, kind of Miss Lola as an example, that's one of her favorite little toys. And in order to kind of keep her engaged and excited, one of the things that she still loves at almost 8 years old is getting a new toy. And so that's one of her favorites. And then a couple of weeks ago, we got her a toy parrot, and we started calling it the party parrot. And I don't really know how that happened, but she just would bring it to the life of the party, whatever was happening in the house. And so we termed it the party parrot. But for her, that's still something that she really enjoys. And it also gives her good exercise. She likes when my kids will throw her toys and she can chase it. And so those are things that kind of help to keep her engaged, keep her excited, keep her having that zest for life. And again, it's good exercise for her. So, I do think that maintaining an appropriate exercise routine for them is really important. Again, they may not be able to go on these long hikes in the middle of the day, but Lola, for example, still loves to go on a walk just about every morning. And if she doesn't get it, you will be the first to know about it. Maintaining appropriate social interactions, do they love and are they okay going to the dog park? Do they still go to doggy daycare? Just those kinds of things to keep them engaged and excited about life. For Lola, new toys and tricks, absolutely. She really likes that. And whoever said you can't teach an old dog new tricks, they haven't met Lola. She still is really good at learning new things. I think good quality time together with them is huge. Keep doing the things that you've always done with them. Just keep in mind that it might need to be modified a little bit as they get older, but it doesn't mean that those things need to stop entirely. We just might need to change them a little bit. Create a bucket list and have things that you guys are checking off together as you age together. And then I always, again, just kind of routine and appropriate veterinary care, making sure that we're doing everything that we can to keep them as healthy as possible, mentally and physically, I think is great. And so a little bit on quality of life. So I go into some examples here, but in general, how is it that we measure quality of life in our pets? And when I'm talking with an owner, or we're feeling like we need to be potentially making a difficult decision, or the owner is questioning whether or not their quality of life is what it used to be, I will just very simply tell people, pick 3 things that make Lola, Lola. And if she is consistently not doing those 3 things, then maybe her quality of life is not what it is supposed to be. It is helpful for people to hear that, because it helps them to really just try to think a little bit objectively, because it's an incredibly overwhelming, conversation and thing to think about. And so just as an example, kind of in my own life, so when I think about Lola as she ages, and I'm, trying to just kind of keep an eye on her, when I think about the things that she lives for, it's food. Absolutely. If the day comes, that she is having a decreased appetite or turns down a meal, I will know 100% that something is wrong, because she just absolutely lives for food. so much so to where she has to get at least 3 or 4 little meals a day. We just take a normal amount and spread it out for her because she's just so excited about food all the time. Being with my kids. So, that's my oldest daughter with her. They were doing shake and just giving love and kisses. And, she thoroughly enjoys her time with them. She kind of thinks of them as her own, I think. And so if there were to come a time when that was changing, I might need to kind of assess things. And then we kind of talked about her new toys and her party parrot. The other thing that she just is obsessed with is tennis balls, any kind of ball really, but she really loves the tennis balls. And so for me, when I think about her just in my own life, those are the things that I will continue to watch for as she ages. So there are some, additional quality of life indicators. So, how comfortable are they? How are they at moving around? Are they eating and drinking? How is it that they interact with their family? What are their favorite things? And, what will our oncology service actually at Four Seasons has, this is where I got this from, because they have a really good quality of life packet that they use for helping animals that have cancer when it's hard for an owner to kind of assess how their quality of life is. And so we will ask them to do an initial valuation of all the things that are listed above there. So the comfort and pain, mobility, etc. Just do an initial evaluation and give each one of those things a number from 1 to 4. 1 is they're not doing great. 4 is they're doing awesome. And you have that initial evaluation, and then you can do a daily or weekly evaluation thereafter, just depending upon, I think, what's most comfortable and kind of where the pet is, in their need for a quality of life discussion. And so just as an example, I certainly won't, nor do I need to read all of these, but when we're looking at pain and comfort, 4 points would be they're pain-free. They do not seem painful at all. 3 points is maybe a little bit of mild pain and discomfort, which is easily controlled by oral medications. And then you go all the way down to 1, where, their pain isn't able to be controlled unless they're hospitalized and receiving things like IV pain medications. And so that's, between 1 and 4 is quite the extreme, but just as an example. And also when we're looking at their favorite things and how happy they are. So again, 4 points would be they're doing great. They participate in all their favorite activities, play with all their favorite toys. They're doing the things that make them them. Whereas all the way down to 1, they're not doing those things anymore, or they want to, but they physically can't. Maybe they can't walk. Maybe every time they get up, they're stumbling. Maybe their pain is so bad that they can't do that anymore. So those are all things that we need to take into account when we're, looking at some of that. And then again, just one more example here. So just their interaction and attitude. So 4 would be completely normal interactions and no concerns, whereas 1 would be they have kind of this abnormal hiding behavior. They don't really seem to care about anything anymore. They're uninterested in playing or having anything to do with the kids anymore like they used to, kind of like in, what Lola does in my home. So just some, quality of life things to think about there. And again, I do always encourage you to don't be afraid to have that discussion with your veterinarian. It's a scary topic. People don't want to think about that. But I think it's a very compassionate thing that we can do as pet owners, because I always tell owners quality of life in them is everything. It is all about quality and not as much about quantity. We know we're not going to have a dog until they're age 25. It just doesn't happen. And so the time that they are here needs to be good time. Because they're just too precious really for it to be anything else. So don't be afraid to have that conversation if you feel like it's needed, and you can be given some guidance. And so just some additional thoughts from me, when it comes to pet ownership, just coming from a veterinarian. Just remember, age is not a disease. So, yes, there are changes that happen, but just like when we age, getting older is not a disease that we have. It's part of life, and there are some things that come with it, but certainly we still can live a really great, fulfilling life, and so can our pets right along with us. I think, my other tip is to pick the right pet for your lifestyle as you age. And what do I mean by this? So do your research. You know, pick wisely or choose wisely when you're choosing to bring a pet into your home. Think about, how long is this animal going to live? How big is this animal going to become? Do you weigh 90 pounds and this animal is going to get to 120? Maybe that's something to think about. Maybe that's not something that you want to be trying to walk down the street, because you might visit the concrete a time or two. How much exercise does this animal need? So for instance, some of these herding breeds, the Australian Shepherds and things like that, they live for exercise and they require it. A lot of it, they're not couch potato pets. And quite honestly, that need stays as they age for quite some time. So that's something that we need to think about. Are pets allowed where you live? Do you have kids? Do you have grandkids? Are they young? Would your animal, or would an animal that you bring into the home be okay with that? Is owning a pet in the cards financially? Because they do require that routine veterinary care. There are emergencies that happen. And so just kind of taking all of that into account so that you can make sure that you can age well together and, have it be something that's very positive and not stressful. And I think if you can make a good choice, the benefits of owning a pet, again, as I said previously, are endless. My other tips would be, put, the closest 24-hour emergency hospital in your phone. Put their phone number in there. Put their address in Google Maps, because in an emergency, I can tell you, as a veterinarian and as a mom, it's hard to be trying to think clearly when something you love is in need of attention right away. And so that's not something that you want to try to be doing at the last minute. So just do yourself a favor and be prepared. Another thing to consider is, would it benefit you to consider pet insurance? Talking with your family veterinarian about those options, I think are good, because that might be something that is right for you and your pet. Incorporate them into your life as much as possible. The joys of kind of sharing this life together are endless. And so spending good quality time with them, and, it doesn't always have to be all about the toys, but just going on that walk, doing that exercise, snuggling on the couch together, all that kind of stuff, just do it. And it's so fulfilling. Again, the emergency vet is coming out in me. So know what is toxic. This is absolutely not an all-inclusive list. But certain things that I think of, grapes and raisins, chocolate, lilies and cats, other things would be xylitol. There are even some melatonin products that we take as people that contain xylitol, sugar-free gums, all that kind of stuff. Ethylene glycol or antifreeze obviously is very toxic. Over-the-counter medications. So, dogs can't take an ibuprofen like we can. Dogs really can't be taking Tylenol like we do. And so those are things that I would recommend familiarizing yourself with when it comes to pet ownership. And then I'm a huge advocate of having, again, kind of these emergency type phone numbers. And so I did go ahead and just put the phone number for ASPCA poison control in here for you so that you have that just handy. Tape it up in your cupboard or put it in your phone and just have it there. Certainly, if you have any questions, you can always call your veterinarian. But I think if you feel like they've ingested something, you know, having this number is always good. And poison control may recommend that they need to go into an emergency facility, whether we would need to induce vomiting, or maybe they say, hey, it's not that toxic of a dose, you're okay. Just try to keep it away from them the next time, that kind of thing. So just again, some additional thoughts from me, just tips for you as a pet owner. So in summary, pets are amazing companions and we love them and they enrich our lives in many, many ways. Some normal aging changes are going to happen. You'll probably start to notice those as your pet ages and as we age, right? There are common disease processes that will affect these older pets, and with routine, you know, preventative veterinary care, a lot of these are easily caught and can be managed. You know, things like osteoarthritis, you know, those kinds of things are definitely doable if you can kind of stay on it and do routine screenings to keep them as healthy as possible. As I've said multiple times, if you have any questions or concerns about what you're seeing, call a veterinarian. Geriatric pets can live wonderful, happy lives. They just might need some occasional modifications, just like we do. I certainly couldn't do now what I could do when I was, you know, 16 or even in my 20s. So we can't expect them to do that either. And again, don't be afraid to have those quality of life discussions if you feel like they are indicated. Veterinarians are, you know, compassionate people who want to help. And so if you have questions or concerns, you know, certainly please reach out to them. And with that being said, we can go ahead and I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have for me. Thank you so much for your time today.
Ayla, your presentation was extraordinarily thorough and very patient and well presented. Really interesting. You know, to hear all the different issues that are involved with either making the decision to own a pet as an older person, or you know, the whole issue of aging pets. So I'm going to ask some questions, and we'll see if we get any more from our audience as well.
Sure.
You know, one of the things that I was thinking about, because if you've been a pet owner like we have been, I think it's always difficult to understand, like, how do you know if your pet is in pain? And then secondarily, well, let's talk about that one first, then I'll ask a follow-up question on that, because I always find that to be difficult. Now, obviously, if you see something dramatic, like they can't walk and they're crying, well, yeah, that's obvious. But, you know, I guess it's kind of like slight to moderate pain. How do you tell? Because I've always had a difficult time identifying that. So are there rules of thumb on that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's hard because sometimes the signs associated with pain are subtle, and they could also go along with signs of something else going on. So if it's not something like you are, as you stated, you know, they're visibly limping as they're walking, or they yelp when they lay down or when they're picked up, you know, those are very obvious signs.
They're obvious ones.
Yeah, some other signs of pain would be, you know, you throw their favorite ball and they make it halfway and then they decide, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. That might be pain related. We also see changes in appetite associated with pain. Pets that are painful don't want to eat. Maybe they don't want to, you might notice they don't want to bend down to their food and water bowl and bend their neck the way that they used to. And that might be the only thing that you see. Other things would be them not wanting to get up and move much. And it's hard, and that's why I think the most important thing to do would be to have them seen if you have those concerns. Because if they don't want to get up, or if they stop halfway, running to get their ball, that could also mean that there's something metabolically going on with them and that they're not well, but it also could mean that they're just painful. So I think, also the hiding behavior, if they're hiding somewhere and they don't want to come out, they don't know how to express that to us other than, trying to get away from whatever's hurting them. So you might find them in the closet and you don't know why, and they've never been in there before. So it can be difficult. It can be subtle. And so I think that's where, us as veterinary professionals are there to help.
And I think one of the other difficult things is knowing when it's time to say goodbye to a pet, because
Yep.
we've lost a whole bunch of pets through the years, having raised 4 kids along with them. And I remember one cat we had to use an IV for kidney failure, and we were doing it for I would say probably a year, and it became extremely difficult. While she was not on the IV, her quality of life seemed okay, and that's why we did it. But I think that's one of the overwhelming decisions that have to be made when you're a pet owner, is when is that time right?
Mm-hmm.
I think you pointed some things out, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's never an easy decision. And ways that I will guide owners include, again, picking those 3 things that make them them. I also say we always want to make sure that we are doing things for them, not to them. So if they're at a point in their life where, again, for a while, it sounds like with your cat, you were doing things for her, because when she was doing well, she was doing well. And yes, she needed a little bit of support, but if it got to a point that those intervals of her doing well were getting shorter and shorter and shorter, and then she's having to have an IV or fluid under her skin just because she can't be without it, but she's miserable in between, that's kind of where maybe we get to we're doing things to them instead of for them.
Mm-hmm.
Lastly, I always tell people too, just because we can doesn't mean that we should. And I would say that a lot of those conversations will be, if your pet was just diagnosed with a terminal cancer, yes, there are chemotherapy or radiation or surgery and all of those options. There's nothing wrong with any of those options. But it's also okay to say it's time. Just because I can do all of these things doesn't mean that I should, and it doesn't mean that I necessarily want to. And so those are just some other tips. And again, I think, looking back at some of those things, like their interactions with people, how well they're eating and drinking, how are they moving around, are they in pain, and doing that initial assessment, and then keeping a daily calendar. And I'll even tell people, it doesn't even have, if that is too much for you, the 1 through 4, just pick 1 week or pick 30 days or whatever it may be. And every day you put a G for good or a B for bad. And that would indicate he or she had a good day, he or she had a bad day. And then you go back and you look, because sometimes when you keep track of that, it's a lot more objective for you to actually see it written out than trying to go back and say, well, last week she was okay, or was she okay? Because it is a tough decision. So I think that the G or the B system is what I've guided people for as well, and that helps.
That's great recommendations. Pet insurance is becoming more popular. I don't really know very much about it, and I think our audience would be interested in understanding, how does it work? What's the expectation that somebody might have for average premiums, either monthly or annually? Because I mean, veterinary care, one of the big concerns pet owners have is the expense of veterinary care. You know, we probably spend $3,000 on one cat.
Sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It's really easy to have it happen. So
Yeah.
maybe you could talk about both of those things.
Yeah. And I will say, as an emergency and critical care specialist, we deal with pet insurance, absolutely. But I probably don't have as much knowledge about things like premiums and things like that as a family veterinarian would. And so I definitely would encourage people in the audience, if they have questions about pet insurance, to reach out to their family veterinarian. And a lot of the practices will have contacts, with pet insurance. And so whether it's a pamphlet or a phone number, you also could Google, the different kinds of pet insurance. But I think that, it's not something that, let's say that your pet gets, in my world, hit by a car. And then we want to do something like pet insurance. It's not going to work really that way. And so I always encourage owners, if we are having a pet insurance discussion, if it's something you want to do, consider it early, because the insurance companies, are, I think in my experience, going to be, more likely to cover those things if you have had insurance and then something happens. It can't really go very well the other way around, although you may have a really difficult or catastrophic type event and then decide to get insurance. And that's great, because if anything happens in the future, then you're covered. It just might not help you in that very instance, if that makes sense. But, there are some insurance companies, I know of one at least, where they can sometimes, in an emergency situation, pay the veterinary hospital directly, and then will pay things on the back end. And so, veterinary insurance has definitely developed probably immensely in the last even 5 years or so. And so I just would encourage you to talk to your veterinarian and do some research about what plan might work well for you.
We're coming out of a pandemic, and so travel becomes a big issue now, as people can get out and either move in cars or air travel. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about pets and travel.
Yeah. So air travel for pets, I think, I'm always a little cautious about it. And I think if it's the right pet and the right situation, great. There are some pets that, if they're small enough, are allowed to be right with you in little carriers. I believe the airlines will require things like up-to-date vaccines, maybe even a wellness health check before getting on a plane. It's also maybe helpful to know if your pet experiences things like motion sickness, whether they're in an airplane or a car. But I think definitely for air travel, I think as of right now, they're focusing more heavily on therapy animals and trying to minimize the number of animals that are being taken around. And even for a while, I think they put a halt on, even some therapy animals being able to fly. But I think if your pet is small and able to be with you, that's probably my preference. Some of the larger pets and things that will need to experience air travel will go on a different part of the plane. And they're just away from their owners and things like that. And so I'm just a little more hesitant because they're not right with someone, just for making sure that they're doing okay, making sure that they didn't get sick and throw up on an airplane, things like that. And then again, before any kind of air travel, I would encourage you to talk to your veterinarian, because there may be certain health conditions where your veterinarian would say, I don't think air travel is best. Traveling in the car, I think one of the biggest things that we see is motion sickness. Cats and dogs will throw up in the car from being sick. And so while you don't necessarily need, to make sure that your pet is up to date on vaccines or had a wellness check before traveling in the car, it might not be a bad idea to just reach out to your vet, see if they can do a physical, see if are they due for their, annual blood work, maybe make sure that there's not something that you're finding before you go on a road trip. And if you are going on a road trip, I also encourage people to research where some veterinary hospitals are going to be along the way. Because even in the last week, I've had people who have been traveling from out of town and we end up seeing their pet. And they had to Google where we were at the last minute to find veterinary care. So I think the more you can plan ahead for something like that, the better. And if your pet does suffer from something such as motion sickness, your veterinarian can give you medications to help so that, like for me, if I go on a car ride, I have to take Dramamine beforehand. There are things that we can do for our pets as well.
And I've got a question. You surprised me when you talked about the heartworm medications for cats and dogs as they age. Typically that's given when they're very young and then not repeated. And that's the first I've heard of that, at least from my perspective, that's a treatment that should go on throughout their geriatric years as well.
Yeah, monthly heartworm prevention should be taken monthly. I feel for
their entire lives.
Yeah, for their entire lives. Yep. And there are some people who, say, oh, heartworm disease and stuff doesn't happen all year round. It's only certain months of the year. It can definitely happen all year round. And so can GI parasites. And so that's what I tell people too, is that the heartworm preventatives don't just cover for heartworm. You're going to get your worms and just those kinds of things that if we're out living life with our pets, they could eat feces from an animal or, do something or catch some kind of infectious, disease out there. And so it's just part of their overall preventative health, kind of keeping them at least on a deworming medication and stuff monthly as part of their preventative care.
And so what would be symptoms that you would see of a dog or cat that's hasn't been taking heartworm medication or parasite medication? What would be the warning signs of a problem maybe developing?
So most of the time with GI parasites, your pet will start to experience diarrhea, softer stool. Now, in an aging pet or any pet, there's GI causes of diarrhea and there's non-GI causes of diarrhea. So certainly not every cause of soft stool or diarrhea is a GI parasite, but it's on the list. And depending on your pet's lifestyle, if I can't completely rule it out, I will just empirically deworm the pet for, a 3 to 5 day course just to ensure. But some pets live on a farm. Some pets, drink out of stagnant water all the time. There are also some GI parasites that will just lead to vomiting. And so people think, oh, they're vomiting, it wouldn't be a parasite. It could be. So, those are the more common signs. And then certainly something with heartworm, we definitely can see pets that are coughing or having an increased respiratory rate and effort. So anytime something like that's happening, they should go into the veterinarian for chest x-rays, absolutely. And then we can decide from there, do we need to test them for something like heartworm or does something like that need to be ruled out?
Well, I will tell you that you had indicated how important it is for people to have pets and especially older people who might be alone. And you see it all the time. I see it all the time. We live right on the open space, so I see the same pet owners all the time out with their animals, and it's a very happy experience for them. So we can't thank you enough for a wonderful presentation, incredibly informative.
My pleasure.
And thank you so much again. And we hope to see you again in a later presentation in one of our other aging programs.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. It was an honor.
Thank you. Good luck.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.